All right, everyone. We are here today to answer a question that you guys have probably asked us, specifically Peter, and it's been about the eligibility of Tom Holmes. Now, I came up recently with a nice little depth chart video, and I said I was going to include dual nationals, and I left him out. And I left him out because he's got a little bit of a different case than someone like Daniel Jebsen or Stefan Mitrovic, and that's what we're here to kind of break down today and basically give you guys an answer of whether we believe Tom Holmes is actually eligible for the Canadian national team. So to help me do that, I've brought Peter back on, and I really appreciate him always giving up some time. He's had some difficulties in the last couple of days, but we found a way to get him on. So Peter, how you doing today?
Doing better than I was yesterday when we were initially going to record this. So that's always a positive.
That's good. That's good, man. I appreciate you coming on. So let's just get right down to it. So Tom Holmes, the FIFA eligibility is a very interesting thing. There's a lot of different ways around a player can become eligible. So I guess just to give the viewers a little background on Tom Holmes, what makes him eligible to represent or potentially eligible to represent Canada?
I'll do my best to sum this up as best as I possibly can and as concisely as I can. So there was a comment under an article written by Joshua Cloak in The Athletic, and they had written that you should check out Reading center back Tom Holmes, who I believe is Canadian eligible. So someone took the comment and forwarded it over to me and said, is this true? Could you maybe do a little digging? So I did. I forwarded this over to Reading's PR staff. And as I did this, I then started chatting with Canucks Abroad. And Canucks Abroad were actually able to contact Holmes directly. And Holmes confirmed that he has a grandmother who is Canadian, who was born in Canada. So this is key because if you look at FIFA's eligibility requirements, if you are doing a change of nationality, especially when, like Tom Holmes is, you're not born in the country you're applying for, and this was kind of the case with Ike Ugbo as well, you can be eligible through a parent who's Canadian, as well as a grandparent who is Canadian if necessary. But the caveat is, you need to be able to show the paperwork that this parent or grandparent is in fact Canadian. So this was the holdup with, if you'll remember, Josh, and maybe anybody who's watching this, the Sandra Solholm debacle.
Yep.
In that he claimed that he had a grandparent who was born in the GTA. Motherwell actually confirmed this. Yet there was a conflicting report from the CSA side that apparently the link was too tenuous, or it just wasn't strong enough. And apparently they just didn't have the right paperwork to prove it. So therefore they didn't pursue it any further. So this is the one holdup right now with Holmes, is that can he show proof that his grandmother is in fact Canadian, like he claims that she is. And I'm sure this is true. It's just more so the fact that, is there some sort of a birth certificate or some sort of identification lying around?
And it's a funny thing too, because when it comes to the Canadian national team in a position of interest, it's center back. We had that hope coming by us, and then it just quickly went away. Then all of a sudden this new hope comes back up with Tom Holmes. What would you say about this from Tom Holmes' perspective? Do you think that there's actually interest in him representing Canada at the international level?
It sure seems like it, because in my conversations I've had with the guys at Canucks Abroad, and do check them out if you haven't already, at Canucks_abroad on Twitter, and support their Patreon as well while you get the chance, because they do terrific work. Holmes actually did say to them and was asking questions about whether he's eligible, how could he find out if he is. So it's actually something that he is, or at least at the time was pursuing. And then the fact that you have also Canadian international Junior Hoilett on the same club, I'm sure helps as well. And in fact, I think on the Northern Football Podcast, we're working on trying to get Junior Hoilett onto the show soon. So we'll ask him if he's done any sort of digging and maybe trying to push him in the right direction here.
That is fantastic. He scored a worldie too, so we definitely have to do that. It seems like the Canadians always double up. We had him at Besiktas, we have him now, two of them at Club Bruges. Now, hopefully, two of them will be at Reading. But it's an interesting prospect, and it's the reason that he's probably is interesting. And if we can find a way to get this done, this is a player who, now I'll ask you this for the next question, but I mean, 2022, maybe, but regardless, there's that one coming up in 2026. He's 22 years old right now. He's got a very high ceiling. Mm-hmm. It kind of seems like last year, but like most players on the Reading side, they kind of had a bit of a dip in form, but he's playing very consistent minutes in the championship right now, which is, in my opinion, I think it is a top 10 league, up for debate. Regardless, he's playing very competitive minutes. So do you think that there's any chance for a call-up before the 2022 World Cup? I'm assuming probably not. It's probably a little too tight, but he could probably more than likely be a real asset, I guess, potentially for them to take a look at for 2026.
I would think that's the target, yeah. And that's totally fine because, as you said, he is 22 years old. He is playing in a top tier league. In fact, ironically, in the January window, Nottingham Forest was actually looking at him as a reinforcement. Yeah. And they ultimately went with other targets, but he was someone that was being pursued by a club that is now in the Premier League. So you can see that there is external interest in Holmes, despite the fact that the club as a whole struggled, and he had his moments where he just kind of lost concentration and had some slip ups. That's going to happen, especially for a young defender on a struggling team. But the reason he's so appealing, Josh, is he's captaining his boyhood club at the age of 22. So clearly he has strong leadership skills. He is playing regularly every week in a very competitive league. And on top of that, he's playing in a back three, which we know Canada deploys at various times and has over the last 18 months. So he'll slot right in very nicely. And he's right-footed, but he can play on either side of the defense. He can play as a left-sided center back, or he can play as a right-sided center back. But Canada is lacking options on the right side at the moment. Yes, Stephen Vittoria and Daniil Henry can play there, as can Joel Waterman, who has been in preliminary squads. So he is at least on the radar, but hasn't locked down a consistent spot yet. So having a player of Holmes's caliber, who is very strong in the air, who is quite defensively sound, his positioning and awareness are very top notch. His distribution maybe isn't the best by a championship standard, but if you compare him to the other Canadian center backs, still very, very strong, loves the long ball. If I had to think of a comparable for him in that department, it's probably Scott Kennedy, but I think he's probably a little more comfortable under pressure when he's on the ball than Scott Kennedy is. So there's a lot to like, because in terms of how well-rounded he is, even when you take the maybe slightly lower level of distribution that he might have compared to, say, even a Kamal Miller, who, as we know, is very comfortable on the ball, he would become arguably Canada's most well-rounded and best center back if he committed.
Yeah, I mean, you took the words directly. That was going to be my next question, is how do you see him fitting? Because when I take a look at him playing in that Reading system, he plays mostly at the heart of that back three. And guess who the two players are that are aging out? We have Stephen Vittoria, Daniil Henry, who more than likely after 2022 probably won't feature for the Canadian men's national team too much, definitely not in a prominent role leading up to 2026. So if you can get this young 22-year-old who's playing at that level, who's had links to the Premier League, come in and play at the heart, and he can also play in that back four like we talked about, and even at the outside right center back if Alistair Johnston decides to switch out a little bit. So it just adds so much coverage to a position that we're desperately in need of, and it gets you excited. Like when I heard this, it came off the disappointment of Sonder not being able to qualify. So I was like, all right, how much is actually there? But it seems like this one could actually have some legs. And out of all the dual nationals, if it was up to me, if I could get one to commit, and there are some good ones up there, I feel like if there's an argument that he'd be the most important.
If he is indeed eligible, he immediately becomes the number one dual national to recruit. And it's unfortunate as well that there have been different extenuating circumstances surrounding John Herdman press conferences, like the labor dispute back in June, where I would, in any other situation, ask him about Tom Holmes and see if they've explored it, if that's even a possibility, because that's the one side of this that is still sort of left to uncover, in that no one's really asked the CSA side of things yet. So to me, that is something that is going to have to be asked of Herdman or someone within the CSA as soon as possible, because if he is in fact eligible to play for Canada, he jumps past Stefan Mitrovic, he jumps past Daniel Jebison, he jumps past all those guys right away.
I 100% agree. And on top of that, when 2022 in the World Cup comes to an end, that's the cycle. There's a lot of players that are almost shoo-ins. Like when you look at a player like Daniil Henry, in my opinion, is almost like he's a lock. Even though he's not playing right now, he's just one of Herdman's guys. He's a character player. I'd be very surprised, for example, if he's not going to make it in. So obviously 2022 came too soon, but now it's a full cycle. If we can figure out the labor issues and all that, move on from there, he is an absolute big target if he's eligible, and he could be a massive part of this team going forward. So it'll be very curious to see how it comes on, but hopefully Peter and I, mostly Peter, gave you guys a nice little insight on how this is going to potentially happen and what to look forward to in the near future. But like we talked about, I mean, check Peter out on Twitter. We'll put his link in the description. Check out Canucks Abroad as well. They're always digging up other Canadians playing abroad. It's very impressive, some of the stuff that they do. But Peter, we really appreciate you coming on today and hopefully gave some clarity on this Tom Holmes situation. Any final words before we head out?
I guess just to plug one more thing, the Canadians Abroad roundups for me are back, so check those out on Sportsnet every couple of weeks. So the next one comes, it'll be a week this Monday. Will be the next one. Then you can expect those bi-weekly as well. Lots of goodies always for Canadian soccer fans.
Yeah, I'll try to put in your last article out as well as the Northern Football Podcast link as well. We'll just plug the links, so hopefully anything that you Canadian soccer fans out there can find will be in the description. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Be sure to drop a like, drop a sub, and we'll see you guys next time. Cheers, friends.